All right, way to start with an inspirational message. Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk about habits today. Before we start, can I get a reader that's nice and loud? Okay. Jack, right? Okay, good to see you, Jack. I'm not going to send out a slide, but you're welcome to take as many pictures as you want. And before we begin, I want you to think about habits, and you probably already do this, but I really want you to think deeply about the habits you'd like to start, the habits you'd like to stop, and the things that are kind of getting in the way and keeping you from change. Because this goes really deep. I've done this one about 5 times, and it changes every time I do it. And I am really getting to the core of what keeps us from change. Reader, Jack.
Habits are a set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are acquired through repetition. You've done something so many times that your brain now knows how to do it better than your mind.
So a habit is essentially something that doesn't require a decision anymore. So if you remember when you first learned to drive, like total sensory overload, you couldn't handle too many things at once, couldn't go on the highway. You're thinking about everything you're doing, but as you're getting better and better, it's starting to automate and it's starting to go into the lower part of the brain. And now I drive to work and I'm like, I don't even know how I got here. And that's habitual learning. Maybe some of these are habits as well. You guys all hit the same one and start laughing. Anybody the person that always says sorry even though they did nothing wrong? I'm sorry I do that. So research has shown habits explain about 47% of our daily behavior. And I think as you get older, you get upwards of my age. And if you look at your parents and your grandparents, you're like, you've told me that story 15 times already. You've given me that same advice. You do the same thing. It actually just kind of gets worse and worse as you age.
Are often a lagging measure of your habits. Like a lot of the time people talk about, I want to have more money, or I want to lose weight, or I want some kind of result. But the truth is, your bank account is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning and reading habits. And so it's actually, we think the thing that needs to change is the bank account or the test score or the number on the scale, but actually the thing that needs to change are the habits that precede those outcomes. Every action you take is kind of like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And if you can master the right actions, if you can master the right habits, then you can start to cast votes for this new identity, this desired person that you want to be.
So this is my Instagram Explore page. So this is a lagging indicator of what I've voted for and chosen to look at and favorite. So that's an indication of who I am. Yeah, I do like cute little dogs. I got a 10-pound Snorky. So until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is a paradigm shifting thought that we have probably about 95% of our behavior is subconscious. It's kind of an iceberg. Everything that's the majority of the weight is below the water, and it's driving our daily behavior and our thoughts and our feelings pretty much because we've inherited even from a pre-verbal time up to age 3 and then up to 18, and then you start to become conscious, especially right at this time in your life, which is a great time to become conscious of your habits. because your brain is still fairly plastic. Prefrontal cortex isn't done developing until about age 25. You can still change it after that. The more you can really dig deep and go, I don't like this behavior anymore. I don't like this thought patterns. And then you can do something about it. So anybody willing to volunteer something that they've, a habit that they've tried to either establish or stop and they keep failing? What is it?
Biting my nails.
Great. So you probably do pretty well, maybe for a few days, and then you start again. Is that right? Was there another example?
Sleeping.
Sleeping in? Any others? Reading? Like wanting to do more? Okay.
Going to bed before midnight.
Okay. So what's your problem? I think this is a universal phenomenon that somebody's got habits that they want to establish or stop. And then you're like, why can I not control myself? And then you start kind of wondering, what am I made of? And it's kind of a moral sense of I'm a failure. And there's probably some more serious ones that you keep coming back to, that you just like, you kind of start to think I'm lesser of a person, and toxic shame kind of enters the picture. So the Greeks were kind of describing this phenomenon. They called it akrasia, which is essentially saying you have a weak will. So everything that you couldn't do or wanted to do, but what didn't, came down to a weak will. And I would say this is quite common in our LDS culture. Like everything is agency. It's 100% choice. And I would say there's a distinction between being at fault or sinning and responsible for. So I want to put a little nuance to this discussion, because I don't think this is a healthy way to look at all of our behaviors. This took me about 2 hours to create an AI. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
So this is Paul. I do not understand my actions. I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Kind of a tongue twister, but he's essentially describing what probably every person in this room has felt at one time or another, where they're at war with themselves. Internally, you're like, why am I doing things I don't want to do? And why can't I do things that I want to do? This has fascinated me for 25 years. And I will humble brag that I'm trying to write a book. I haven't written one word yet, but these lectures are all kind of contributing to it. But I'm fascinated that we would call ourselves God's greatest creation, but we have so many things that we're doing that we don't want to do. And Paul, I love that he's describing this phenomenon 2,000 years ago. And then we've got scriptures that talk about this, that the natural man is an enemy to God, and because of the fall, our natures have become evil continually. So I don't want to get into, it'll derail us if we talk about evolution, but you know, however our brain and body have come to be, whether that's through completely random organic evolution, whether that's divinely guided evolution, or God just put our brains and bodies the way they are built to fight against us. And that's part of the mortal condition, is it's designed in such a way that makes change difficult. And Ether 1227, I really find the lack of a letter really interesting. I give unto men weakness. It doesn't say weaknesses, which is usually how we talk about it. He's talking about weakness, that they may be humble. And I think this is kind of the fallen nature of the human body. This is one way of looking at it. that we are either all broken or we are all just totally fine. I don't think some of us are broken and some of us are totally fine. I think the human condition is that we're all broken in some way, and it's largely because of the way our brain and body are built. And this is the battle of your entire life. So I want to take some of the shame out of this akrasia. It's not all weakness of will. It's not all choice. There may be a sense of impaired agency. Carl Rogers, one of the pivotal founders in psychology and therapy. Curious paradox of life is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. I think this runs counter to a lot of the ways we feel that we can't accept who we are in order to become better. But there's this sense of really accepting who we are, flaws and all, before we can move on and become better. Because you can never hate or shame yourself into changing. I have a feeling you've tried it before and it hasn't worked. The Lord loves effort. I think the church in recent years has been getting away from this. We can be perfect in this life. This is kind of our main goal. Yeah, ultimately, I think Elder Holland gave that talk. Perfect eventually, something like that. I can't remember the exact phrase, but even Jesus didn't say he was perfect in this life. He talks about Heavenly Father being perfect. Perfection means something completely different. It means complete. It doesn't take on its current meaning until the Industrial Revolution, when you have industrial manufacturing plants of cars and you can stamp things out and things can be without flaw. That's not anciently what perfection means. And so there's this sense of we need to be kind with ourselves. And I think a lot of you are like, oh, this is dangerous territory. If I say, I'm okay doing that, then I'm just going to do more of it. Will you raise your hand if you feel that way? Like if I'm too nice on myself, if I'm like, no, I'll let this go. Will you raise your hand higher? Yeah, this is a universal feeling, especially in our culture where we're striving for perfection. Well, if I just kind of like, but there's obviously a balance here between not carrying apathy and just letting it all slide, and also thinking that perfection is somehow the ideal. So they've done quite a bit of studies that self-compassion actually helps you achieve your goals better because of the negative things that come with such a hard inner critic. It reduces the sense of toxic shame, which actually propels bad behavior more. You can get used to discomfort from failure, because failure is a good thing. And it actually encourages you to work harder afterwards, because you're like, this is not so devastating, and a failure is not so devastating. So this is called the motivational triad. This is essentially how that fallen brain is built. So we're built to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. The brain weighs 2% of our body weight, but it expends 20% of its energy. So it is always looking to save. It's pretty much lazy, is what it is. And it wants to have a good time. So this is how the habit loop works. So we do something, some kind of behavior, physically, or we think a certain thought, or we feel a certain way. And then if it's something that the body enjoys, then it hits you with dopamine, which we talked about last week. And then you're like, oh, this is useful. This is beneficial. And then it teaches the brain, this is something I want to repeat. So then that creates a craving to do that again, which then connects the reward with the cue or the trigger. And that cue or trigger could be a time of day, a location, a certain set of emotions, or it could be people. Or said another way, this is what we talked about last week with the dopamine. So when you do something pleasurable, you get a spike of dopamine, and the higher it goes, the higher it's going to fall. So you're learning that this is a good thing, and then when it drops below the baseline, that's when you create the craving. So if you take these things, that's going to determine how high that dopamine arc goes. And those things become more pleasurable and more addictive. So every time you're getting some kind of dopamine hit, you're creating a habit. And every time you do it, you're strengthening that habit. So I like to use meth while I'm playing video games and eating chocolate, because that really maximizes the pleasure. So why are habits formed? Habits are formed largely because we want to conserve energy. So because our brain has limited energy and it wants to keep us alive, it has to automate as many things as possible. Can I get my reader to read this? We read this last week, but it's worth reading again.
Just like companies have a financial officer to make sure their budget is balanced, your brain manages the budget for all the accounts in your body. It keeps track of water, salt, glucose, and that keeps a person alive and well. Learning and moving the body uses the most energy for our brain. So prediction and habit are easier than being surprised or making decisions.
So your brain is going to do as much automation as possible. So everything it can shove into the lower primal brain, into the limbic brainstem portion, into the amygdala, the hippocampus, all the areas where you don't have to think, and it takes away and frees up space in the logical brain, it's going to save energy. And it's going to automate it. So this is why when stress happens and it shuts down our logical brain, we revert to bad habits. It goes to our lower brain. And this is why always, if we act on a bad habit, right after or the next day, we come to our senses again and we're like, why did we do that? Because then the prefrontal cortex engages again and we're like, I know better. So hence this problem of always coming back to biting your nails or whatever your issue is. It's hard to give up because the lower part, animalistic part of our brain takes over.
In this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain.
Every time you do a certain behavior, you start building up a fatty substance around that neuron connection called myelin. And if it becomes really thick, it can actually travel 100 to 300 times faster than a normal connection. Every time you start doing habitual behavior, you're kind of carving out roads and pathways in your brain. And this can be either your best servant or your worst of masters. So you can kind of feel sometimes like you're not even driving your own car. Going back to what we were talking about, like, why am I doing this? And here's a spiritual parallel.
In Nephi's prophecy of the latter days, he witnessed the tactics Satan would use to subtly ensnare his victims. He compared Satan's method to flaxen cord, by which Satan gently leadeth them by the neck, until he bindeth them with his strong cords forever. Flax was grown in the ancient Near East in very early times. Among other things, flax was used in making strong ropes or cords. A single strand or thread was weak, but by twisting or braiding multiple strands together, flax could be made into a thick, durable rope. When soaked in water, it could be made even stronger, and knots could become impossible to untie. With this in mind, Nephi's use of the phrase flaxen cord symbolizes Satan's efforts to use a sin or spiritual weakness to lead an individual from one degree of sin to another. If an individual does not repent and turn away from their sins, then Satan could twist or braid the individual cords of sin into strong cords which bind down his victims forever. Like a flax rope soaked in water, the knots become difficult, perhaps even impossible, to untie, and the unrepentant become hopelessly entangled in their sins.
So the one that obviously most people probably think about this is pornography. I know this is something that a lot of people battle with. So let me just give you a personal scenario. So I'm in third grade, going to elementary school in Virginia. I'm in the trees around the playground area, and somebody had left a Penthouse magazine on the ground. So as an 8-year-old, I pick up this magazine. I'm like, wow, what is this? And you can imagine what that's doing to my body, which is designed to do this. I mean, that's a huge dopamine hit. So you start programming a brain at 8 that knows no better, is obviously not going to go home and tell mom, hey, mom, what's this? Because I know something's wrong. But how much agency is at play here at age 8, and then me struggling for 10 years on and off to deal with this kind of very difficult thing? So at some point this more and more agency comes, but every time I'm exposed to pornography, I'm strengthening that path in my brain. So what I want to draw out in this parallel, this story, is we need to remove a lot of the shame from some of our bad behaviors, because some of this we just can't control. Life is what it is, and our brain is working against us. But that's why I said being at fault and being responsible are different things. So at some point I'm becoming responsible for, okay, what do I do? How do I use my agency now to break free of this compulsion? Does that make sense? So your agency is, do I go talk to a therapist about this? Do I go talk to a bishop about this? What do I do about it now? But if you're struggling with pornography, it's not 100% agentic. All your habits have some kind of bodily, biological component to it that is keeping it in place, that's kind of fighting against you. So I don't want to say it's none of your fault, because I think that leads us down the wrong road, but it's also not all your fault. I think there's kind of a varying degree of agency at play with all of our good and bad habits.
He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck. But at least I could ride it.
So he had his 8-year-old do the same thing. Took him 8 months. Guess how long it took the 8-year-old? 2 weeks. He got so good at riding the backwards bicycle. Guess what happened when we went to a normal bicycle? He actually would crash. So he couldn't flip from one from the other easily. So this is an example of how some habits can easily get, really deeply get ingrained. And it takes a lot of effort to get out of it. Sometimes called activation energy. If we use the parallel of the body budget, we're essentially trying to get more energy to focus on establishing new habits. It's kind of like when you go down a sledding hill and you've got these already established paths. It takes energy to go kind of carve out your own path. That's essentially what's going. So we're going to talk about strategies, systems on how do you get more energy, how do you decrease the need for energy, and how do you kind of hack the systems. So I'm going to give you some strategies on doing this. A lot of us rely on motivation, but how successful is motivation? I'm going to go to the gym when I feel like it. Okay. You know, motivation comes and goes, right? So action, inspiration, motivation. You can go read all sorts of books about why you should go work out, and why you should not procrastinate. And you can get more inspiration. But how many times have you not felt like socializing and you start talking to somebody and you're like, oh, this is actually fun? You went to that party you didn't want to go to and you're like, oh, it's not so bad. Okay. Or you go to the gym and you're like, okay, now I'm in the rhythm. You start running, or you start studying. You're like, okay, this is not nearly as bad. Procrastination, you always kind of imagine it's terrible. Then you get to work and you're like, that was not as bad as I thought. Any engineers in here? What's the small gear called? Small gear. Okay, thank you for the technical term. I think it's called a pinion. Is that correct? No? We're going to go with small gear. So there's some habits that are easier to start and they allow us to turn bigger, more difficult things.
Anything on this list that takes a little bit of willpower to begin with ends up giving you back far more willpower than they take. And not just for these challenges. It's not just that exercising makes it easier to exercise. Studies show that exercising makes it easier to eat right, to not spend too much money, to stop procrastinating, to pay better attention. All of these things have a kind of global training effect on what you could think of as your willpower muscle.
I forgot to include the quote, but Elder Hales, who's passed away, said that reading and feasting on the Word of God is so important. It's more important than sleep. That could be one of those like small gears that help you allow you to do other things better. This is one, which is sleep. They've actually done quite a few studies that show that the more sleep you get for addicts and alcoholics, the less likely you are to relapse. So that's kind of a foundational one. I assume you're familiar with this concept of choosing hard now, easy later, or easy now, hard later. This is leaning into difficult things. So you got to decide what part of the hard, because you're not going to escape the easy. You can't pick up one end of the stick and not the other. Choose when you want to embrace the hard.
Don't know this, but there's a brain structure called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. As we pointed out before, that's a noun, it's a name, it doesn't mean anything. Right. We could call it the cookie monster.
Right.
But what's interesting about this brain area is there are now a lot of data in humans, not some mouse study, showing that when people do something they don't want to do, like add 3 hours of exercise per day or per week, or when people who are trying to diet and lose weight resist eating something.
Right.
When people do anything that they, and this is the important part, that they don't want to do.
Right.
It's not about adding more work. It's about adding more work that you don't want to do.
Yes.
This brain.
So he talks about go circuits and no-go circuits. He says the more times we engage the no-go circuits, we build this anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Fancy word for saying willpower. Kind of cool that they located an area. I don't think everything is responsible, or this is responsible for everything with willpower, but you can actually grow this and it has a universal effect. So when you lean into something difficult and do something difficult, that applies to your ability to do more difficult things, which means that you can grow this ability to be more disciplined. So you can start small, like making your bed. I have a feeling you guys are challenged with this, resisting distraction. Every time you feel that tug to check your email, to pull out social media, to look at a web page, to check ESPN scores, every time you resist that, you're strengthening this area of your brain. So I think it's useful for me to know I'm actually kind of doing like little reps, mental reps for building that area of the brain. So how do we stop bad habits? Socrates says this is really cool. I love when ancient folks get it right. Neurobiologically, it's hard. Your brain doesn't understand the word don't. So you can't say don't do that, because like we talked about with the pink elephant effect, it actually kind of creates more of it. So instead of saying don't do X, Y, Z, aim for a new habit, because you can't make that neuron pathway disappear, but you can weaken it. So let's say you drink alcohol for a long time, or you love smoking cigarettes or marijuana. You can get rid of that habit and it will weaken its strength. But if you come back to that same habit 20 years later, it's going to come back like it's never disappeared. So we have to expend our energy, that activation energy, on establishing new habits. So this idea of disenchantment is kind of a Buddhist idea, and acceptance and commitment therapy. So if you kind of sit there and think about what habits do for you, because every bad habit is doing something for you. I love soda, but I don't love everything it does for me. So I was thinking for weeks, months, I was like, what is that feeling I feel when I drink a soda? It was such an enjoyable thing for me. But I was starting to be disenchanted because I was thinking of all the ramifications of that habit. And it takes it out of the habit circuitry when you start thinking of it and being present with it.
So one of my teachers struggled with being addicted to potato chips, and they would resist for a while, but eventually they'd have to leave the monastery and they'd have to go into town. And in India, on the side of the road, you have people who are frying fresh potato chips. And so this person would smell these fresh fried potato chips, and someone's hollering, right? And it smells so good, the smell of fresh fried food. And this is the only thing that this guy makes. So it's absolutely delicious, right? Because he's a master. All he does is fry potato chips all day long, every day, 365 days a year. And so eventually my teacher would cave and he'd eat the potato chips. So he went to his guru and he asked him, how do I overcome this? This is the one thing that I can't break. And what his teacher told him was actually kind of bizarre. He said, don't resist the craving at all. Just eat potato chips with full awareness. Anytime you want a potato chip, eat it. And he actually told them that instead of just buying one bag and resisting, I want you to buy 3 bags of potato chips, eat one when you're out in town, and bring the other 2 back to the monastery. Keep them with you at all times. And the moment you want to eat one, give into it, but give into it with awareness. Pay attention to, what does this craving look like? How do I want the potato chip to taste? Am I salivating? Is my mouth watering? When you eat the potato chip, do you enjoy it? And what happens to the desire after? Engage with the potato chip with full awareness. And this is literally what monks do. They don't practice restraining themselves. What they really practice is cultivating awareness. And the cool thing about it is that the moment that you take an action with awareness, you are no longer operating in that habit circuitry. You are chipping away at that habit.
Okay, so part of this is discomfort training. So I want you to do an experiment. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do, and then we'll all do it at the same time. I want you to exhale all the air out of your lungs and then hold that for 15 seconds. Okay, ready? Go. Okay, 15 seconds. Okay, let it go. Okay, nobody's dead, right? How did that feel? Really uncomfortable, right? So what I'm getting at is the ability to sit with difficult emotions is going to help you overcome some of these bad habits. So when you feel an urge, this is called urge surfing. So if you feel an urge to drink a soda, eat a Big Mac, look at pornography, whatever the habit is, just realize that this is a feeling that is not reality. This is not you. This is not something you have to do. This is a thought and an emotional feeling in your body. And imagine it like a wave. It's going to come on and it's going to grow and it's going to reach a peak. Sit there, notice it, be present with it, be okay with being uncomfortable, and let it pass. That urge, that craving will pass. And the more you can do that, the more present you can be, the more curious about what's going on, you can kind of become disenchanted with that urge. Jack, you read this?
Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing the environment.
Okay, so sometimes we have to leave our environments, and this may be coming to BYU for you, and you leave your high school behind you. Sometimes you're like, crap, I'm in a bad situation. I need to go to a new apartment. I need a whole new group of friends. So you can change all your cues and your triggers. He also says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So instead of relying on goals, motivations, the way you feel, you've got to build in systems like cues and triggers, some other things we're going to talk about, in order to make things stick when things get difficult. So I had this habit of going home after a hard day at BYU. About 9 o'clock, I'd sit on the same couch. I'd turn on the TV. I'd open my laptop. I'd do work for BYU. And then I would get like Outshine bars and a soda. It was a time of day. It was an emotional release, and it was a location. I had 3 triggers going on at the same time. And I did this the same night, and then I ended up getting to be 235 pounds. And I was like, okay, I've got to interrupt this by changing my triggers. So I looked at the underlying emotions behind this and changed up some of the triggers and cues. So this is a good exercise to do, is look at those habits and see what's triggering it. And a lot of times you don't think that it's an emotion like stress or boredom that's triggering you to do a certain behavior or think a certain thought. So you can change your surroundings by putting good food where you can see it. You can put dental floss where you're going to see it. You can put your gym clothes by your bedside. You can put a prayer rock on your pillow. Whatever it is, you can alter your environment so the triggers are there to make it easier for you. I had a employee last semester who wouldn't watch Netflix on campus because she was like, this is a study zone. And you can kind of think of a bed as the same way. That's not study, that's for sleep only. They say in marriage, like a bed is only for sex and sleep. It's not for reading or social media or phones. Segment zones is a good way to kind of build up your environment. Who did a Pinewood Derby car? Yeah. Who's won? Okay, hands start dropping. I'm probably the best one. So the whole idea about building this car was to remove friction, right? You're sanding the wheels, you're putting the graphite in the axles, you're doing wind resistance. Same thing with establishing good habits. Friction keeps you from accomplishing so many things because it makes it hard. So if you can hack the friction one way or another, then you're going to find a lot of improvement.
Back in the 1980s, some researchers wanted to convince people in a 4-story office building to start using the stairs. So they started just the way all of us would. They started trying to convince people. They put up signs. It's good to take the stairs. It's good for your health. It's bad to take the elevator. Waste energy. But the signs had no effect. So these very creative researchers decided, okay, let's try something different. They slowed the closing of the elevator door by 16 seconds. And that was enough to dissuade people. They reduced the elevator use by 1/3. And the wonderful thing about the study is when they put the elevator door back to its original speed, people kept taking the stairs.
So think about friction. So to get people to stop smoking, they raised the tax went up. They put it behind the counter. They started putting signs up. Causes cancer. Makes it more difficult to do those kind of behaviors. So think if something there's how do you decrease friction on something you want to do? How do you make it easier? And how do you make something bad harder? So you can look at distance, time, and effort as a way to increase or decrease friction. So we talked about doing a dopamine detox last week. 2 people in their comments to the RCP started that. I'm super happy. Anybody else start a dopamine fast last week? How's it going? Sweet, good job. So that's abstaining from something. So you might wonder, are there some things that are better moderating? Because the very fact of taking something away might freak some people out. So I think there are people who tend to be abstainers and some people who are moderators. My wife moderates her sugar intake. I can't handle 1 soda. Otherwise, I'll drink like 3. So I have to abstain from sugar for me. But you kind of have to figure out what your personality is and what the subject is. So if we looked at sugar or pornography or social media, sugar might come down to your preference, like whether you need to moderate it because it actually lowers your anxiety to have a little bit and you can moderate it. I can't do it. Pornography is probably, you can moderate it, but and to abstain from it causes a lot of problems because it's like feast or famine where you abstain and then you slip up. I hate that term. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, screw it. I'm back at it. And then it's hours and days later because you kind of have this perfectionist mentality. So, and then social media, that's, you can put friction, you can log out, you can put it on the web. That may be, you kind of got to decide what's best for you for all of these. And sometimes it's really important to build in smaller steps instead of big, huge ones. So we're looking at shrinking our habits. So let me just ask you, well, let me play this as
Showing up. Like I had a reader who ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the things that he did was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So he would show up, be there, do like half an exercise, 5 minutes would go, he'd leave. He did this for like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Now, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds silly because it's the
Why don't
opposite.
you just work out for a half hour?
Yeah. But what he was doing was mastering the art of showing up.
So look at how you can shrink your habits. So if I wanted to date more girls, how can I shrink that habit to make it really small? Talk to a girl. Can I make it even smaller?
Talk to men.
Can I make eye contact in the hallway? Can I say hi? Can you go even smaller? Like instead of feeling like you got to work out every day of the week, maybe you just show up. How small can you make the habit? Because you essentially want it so it's so minuscule that you don't even have to think about it. It takes no effort. Then good at that, and then you build up from there. So maybe you just read one scripture a day until you get in the habit of doing that every day. You guys are aware of that story, the compounding effects. Having a vision of who you want to become, I am physically fit or I am an athlete, will make going to the gym easier, making better food decisions easier. That's why we talk about I am a child of God so much, because a child of God doesn't do certain things. I'm a Latter-day Saint means I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't cheat. That makes those things you've already made those decisions. So this is all part of creating a new story. My son is just turned 16. Very lackluster individual. So a 1.8 GPA, sees no future for himself. Parents worried. The one thing he does well is go to the gym. Goes and gets his patriarchal blessing. The thing is 5.5 pages long. The patriarch after, he's like, you have no idea who you are. His older sisters were totally shocked that their annoying little brother could become this person. And since then, he's got straight A's. That was 2 months ago. Just seeing a vision of what he could become totally changed his habits. So trying to bring the future into the present.
With habits. So
thinking of your future self and what does this mean for who I want to become? And you can use words like I am smart, I am disciplined, I am kind, I am athletic, I am fit, I am healthy. He brings the future into the present. We manage what we monitor. So this brings, when you start measuring your habits, you bring it out of the habit circuitry. Benjamin Franklin is the first one to start this, tracking his habits on a daily basis. We can habit stack. Anybody habit stack? What do, Jack?
In the morning, I brush my teeth and then floss.
Okay, so you put them together. So you can walk and listen to general conference at the same time, or you can temptation bundle. You can reward yourself by watching Fire Island or whatever crappy reality TV show you want to watch while you're working out. So you're doing something enjoyable while you're doing something hard. You got to plan to fail. So this is part of getting out of this perfectionism, black and white thinking, which sets us up for failure. And this is why I was talking about pornography, because we look at that as an abstinence only thing. Then we slip up and then all of a sudden we're a terrible person. So plan on failure because this is part of life. We got to get out of that all or nothing mentality because some things are worth doing poorly. Is it better to look at less pornography or keep doing what you're doing? Is it better to go to some time at the gym than never go at all? Is it better to do some studying, some ministering than nothing at all? It is. So get out of that perfection mentality because it is a utopia. It does not exist. So we're almost done. Done is better than perfect. Perfection is a myth. Progress is reality. So let me close with this. So this is the Grand Canyon. How long did this take to form? Millions, maybe billions of years, right? Think of yourself as the Grand Canyon, and this is how God works. Slowly and steadily. If you fail and you drop and you stop doing what you want to do, bounce back. Don't say, I'm going to start January 1st because that's New Year, because only 8% of people keep their New Year's resolutions. Get out of that perfection mindset and just try to do a little bit better each day. Thanks for coming. Good to see you guys.